Welcome to another episode of the Straight Up Chicago Investor Podcast. I'm your host, Mark Ainley, and today, not with me as always, is not Tom Shallcross. Today we got a special guest, and I am flying solo. So we're going to jump right in today to our weekly housing provider because we want to get a special guest on. I kind of feel alone and not sure what to do without Tom, so that's why I'm going to kind of skip ahead here. But this week's weekly housing provider tip, the last couple of weeks we had a bunch of rain. And I watched a lot of investors call their insurance company about the water backup in their basement sewer line, or it came up in their drain right outside their back door and it seeped all into their basement, ruined their carpet, or created drywall, damn drywall, whatever it might be. But all those people came back with the same conclusion from their insurance broker that sewer backup is not part of their insurance policy. And sewer backup is usually an add-on, and that's what the tip is today, that if you are worried about future coverage for sewer backup, maybe you have a property that traditionally backs up, you got to make sure you add that on there. So some insurance companies will not even provide that at all. So you got to make sure that the insurance broker you're working with knows that's something you need, because that won't be part of the standard coverage. So that is our housing provider tip of the week. We're going to probably get a bunch more rain here, so maybe call your insurance guy up here in the next couple of days. So This is weird. This is my first time flying solo here on the front end. I guess I appreciate Tom more so than ever after today. People always say it's hard to do a podcast by yourself, and I've always been grateful. I always have an awesome power partner. So, Tom, if you're listening, thank you. All right, today's special guest. All right, so yeah, he is expert in the Northwest Side. He quit his W-2 job a handful of years ago. He specializes in $1 million plus flips. He's an expert, even more specific, on the north side of Portage Park, Jefferson Park. A lot of you guys know who he is and appreciate him. And we're going to take a different approach episode here today. It's kind of exciting. We're going to drill into the past of today's special guest. I keep saying special guest. But without further ado, I want to introduce Tom Shallcross. Tom, welcome.
Thank you. Feels weird being on the other side.
Oh man, it feels weird doing it alone, dude.
Long-time listener. Love what you guys are doing.
Oh yeah, thanks. And I know you're always there on the forums. I appreciate it, man. Well, here, today's episode, we talked about doing this episode for a while. We've talked about doing a couple different variations of it, whether it be breaking down a $1 million flip, which I think we still have in the plans to do that, kind of going week by week on that. But today we're going to talk about Portage Park. And before we get into that, though, I think you and me meet a lot of people around the city, and they're interested to hear more about you and me sometimes. Maybe not me, but you. You're a lot more interesting than I am. But I want to just kind of dive into young Tom. What was Tom like as a little kid here? And tell me, Tom at 7 years old, what was he like?
Man, I was ready to talk about Portage Park, but 7 years. So I was born in 83, so it's 1990. I'm probably just catching baseball fever there, right? Like, I think you're playing coach's pitch at that point, and I can remember like those World Series teams. This is back when that used to be on just ABC or whatever, and you would sit down and watch the game. And I can remember like those Twins teams, Reds, Blue Jays won it back-to-back years. Like those early '90s teams, like I can rattle off those lineups. Like I fell in love with baseball and like was obsessed with it.
Bell, Molitor for Toronto, Cecil Fielder. I remember all those. I was big.
Oh yeah.
I was big on baseball. I feel kids aren't these days as big on baseball as I think I was, or maybe you were growing up. But yeah, I used to know. I used to collect baseball cards, so I knew all that.
That was the thing. There was cards back then, so then you started to realize, you started to put teams together based on what came in that Fleer pack.
Yeah, Fleer, Topps, Donruss. So you played baseball. What other sports did you play early on?
Like most guys, I did, everything was seasonal. In the fall, you did football, and then winter, you did basketball, and spring, you did baseball, and kind of just rotate, every year. So that was it, man.
So was it like local peewee football, and like it wasn't tackle though at that young of age though, right?
No, didn't do that till like middle school. Gotcha. So, but yeah, no, playing little league, playing basketball. Thought I'd be the next point guard for the Bulls.
How's that?
I'm a podcast host.
Yeah, feature podcast. How old were you when you had your first girlfriend? Let's break that down.
Whoa. I don't know, man. 4th, 5th grade? Like, well, what constitutes as a girlfriend? First off,
right,
a little.
If you name a girlfriend, it's a girlfriend. I think.
Yeah, I'd say around that point, right?
Yeah, you had to ask her out. You had to either pass a note, you had to do something to get her to say,
Yeah, pass a note girlfriend, probably fourth, fifth grade, somewhere in that range there.
Nice. All right. Was it your future wife, right? That's not how long that goes.
No, she was 18 when we met, though. We were young, but not that young.
Middle school time, you play the same sports. Like, tell me about. He's probably I can see you probably were a little more rowdy.
Yeah, had more hair, had long hair down to like my eyes.
We'll link to that in show notes.
Yeah, my mom will send a picture in if she listens. But no, played sports. Started getting involved in music. I started playing the guitar probably about sixth grade-ish. So if I think it's maybe gotten brought up a few times because we had drummers on the show, but I'm a drummer. I have one of my daughters also playing drums now too. But that's right around the time where I really started getting into music. Starting to play bands and start to do all that thing.
Like, what caused you to get into it? Was it just like band at school, or was it like you watch MTV was coming out with music?
We didn't have cable growing up, Mark. Let's take a step back here. Because MTV was foreign to me. No, I mean, one, the cool kids are doing it, right? So you're like, all right. But no, more importantly, my dad is a musician. Like, my dad was a professional musician, so we have our basement's just full of stuff and always fiddling around. And at some point, it's like, oh, this is actually pretty cool. Let me get involved with this.
That's awesome. How many brothers and sisters do you have?
I got two younger brothers. I'm the oldest of three.
You're the oldest. Parents divorced still? Or parents always stay together or not divorced?
Parents, yeah. No, parents are still together, still in the house that I was born in. Yeah.
What was it?
No complaints growing up, man. It was all good.
What was it like growing up with two brothers? Did you have it good as the oldest? Did you have to lead by example?
Yeah, it was fine. We actually didn't fight that much. We were pretty good with each other. We're still tight to this day. I guess funny story, my middle brother ended up with his own room. I had to share one with the youngest. So
no.
I didn't figure that out. Like, he pulled the wool over me. And like one day I woke up as like a 10-year-old. My buddy's like, why does he have his own room and you don't? I was like, I don't know. Damn it. Messed that one up.
High school time. What was your GPA? Were you a good student? Were you getting causing ruckus? Like, tell us about high school time.
I wouldn't say ruckus. Like a couple things here and there, but not a troublemaker by any means. My mom was a teacher for 30-something years, so I did good, and I didn't mess around with grades. Like, I had a decent GPA.
Did she teach at schools you were at?
She taught at the grammar school I was at.
Oh, no way. That's gotta be tough. I remember, like, our librarian was her daughter was there. It's like, it was cool if you needed lunch money or you forgot your money or something like that, but yeah, that would stink. Someone always there.
Yeah, no.
What, high school, like, I imagine you seem like the type, though, like, I use the word ruckus, and you probably just didn't get caught. You seem like the type that just didn't get caught. You did a lot of shit, but you just didn't get caught. Do I have that spot on, or am I off?
I wouldn't say I'm a troublemaker. You're pushing it a little too far.
I'm
deep to those lines.
Am I leading the witness right now?
Yeah, you're leading the witness. I don't like it.
Maybe I feel I know you better than I thought. I don't know. All right. As a young kid, listen, we always talk to entrepreneurs, right? And we talk about their childhood. A lot of them have these side hustles. How'd you make money growing up? Like, as of your side hustles?
I always worked, I like you, I did the Cutco job one summer.
Okay.
Right? Like, that was the pure hustle. But I almost everything I did would be like landscaping during the day, then go to practices, then at night do umpiring for extra money. And that was kind of like just outside all the time.
Nice. You have 4 kids now, right?
4 kids.
4 kids. What do you? I know that I have a handful of things like, what do you miss about growing up that's gonna be different for your kids now that they'll never get to experience?
I think, technology is great, but there is something to just like, hey, I'm leaving and I'm going to be back at dinner, right? Like, just getting on your bike and going. And to this day, like, those guys, like the guys who stood at my wedding are guys I knew, 8 years old, 10 years old, 12 years old, like Little League friends. Like, those are the guys I still hang out with to this day. So, it's kind of cool. Like, you do their parents, right? Because you can call the phone line, you talk to them for a couple minutes, then you get to them. There's just some of that missing right now, right? Like, you send a text, you just have to, like, ride your bike and see where he's at. Oh, he's not here. Like, I'm going to go ride to this guy's house, see if he's there. Like, there's something cool about that.
There was. And you're right. I never thought about that. Because the one thing that annoys me about my kids staying out plans right now is they go text each other, and then we got to go text his parents. versus it used to be I'd call up somebody and say, hey, can I come over? And usually the parent was already right standing next to him while he's trying to make that plans because his only phone is in the kitchen next to where his mom's standing. Like,
Yeah.
so it seems, I guess that's funny. My kids saw a phone the other day that was tied to the wall, or it was a landline, and they're like, is that what you're talking about when you're a kid? I'm like, yeah, that's what I'm talking about. So you grew up in Portage Park. You now reside in Jeff Park. And why the move, or is there much of a difference? Tell me a little bit about that.
Yeah, so I actually grew up in Dunning. I'm about 50 feet outside Portage. It kind of jogs around there.
Okay.
But most, schools in Portage, most of the stuff was in Portage. So I could say I grew up there, I guess. Very similar neighborhoods, and we can start breaking them down. But, I think once the further northwest you go, so like Jefferson is north of Portage there, the further north you go, like you start to get, one, it's more residential. Like Portage's housing inventory really does have a plethora of 2 to 4 units. Jeff Park has them as well, not as many. You start to get higher price points. Further north you go, it starts to just get more of that residential feel. Every stop on that blue line, you're getting closer to the suburb, right? So you get to Edison Park when people don't even realize it's part of Chicago. You're like, wow, this is amazing.
Gotcha. More of a family view almost. Gotcha. Talk to me. Portage Park. Can we give the borders for those that aren't familiar with it?
Yeah. So I will go, we talked about Jeff, so I'll go from like Jeff going south then. But on the north side, it's Lawrence, which is the east and west running street, 4 blocks north of Montrose. It kind of jogs into Gunnison. They kind of merge into each other. It goes all the way west to Nagle or Narragansett. It changes names. So to the west of that is Harwood Heights, which is a nice little pocket, tiny little suburb just surrounded by a city all over it. It goes south then down to Irving. So if you think of Irving Park, it goes Lawrence, down to Montrose, down to Irving where Merrimack Park is. That's where I played t-ball, and that's still where I'm in softball leagues. And then from Irving, if you start going, so I'm at Irving and Nagle here in my head. Hopefully this is articulating correctly for those listening. If you start going eastbound, you go 4 blocks over to Austin, which is a north-south running street. And there you can take it south all the way to Belmont. So at a very high level, if you want to think about it, it's almost like Lawrence to Belmont, Nagle to Cicero, but it kind of juts in and out a little bit on that northwest corner. And I actually thought Belmont Cicero was a cutoff. I wanted to look it up for this episode so I didn't misspeak, and it actually goes a little bit east of Cicero to where the train tracks are there. And I believe it's one of those K streets. I can't remember which K street, but so like Belmont Cicero is still part of Portage Park. And then most of my stuff and most of the stuff with Drexel Properties, most of it will fall between, call it that Montrose and Addison corridor. So Montrose, Irving, and Addison, 3 main corridors running east-west through the Portage Park neighborhood.
But you grew up in the area. You're obviously wanting to put your hard-earned money in that area. Like, what is it about that area? Like, why are you so devoted to this area?
Yeah, I mean, keep in mind, like, I'm biased, right? I grew up there. My friends are from there. There is a little bit of bias, and I always want to take that hat off because, when you're making investments, any sort of bias is no bueno. So you want to get rid of that. Even removing that, like, there's just so much opportunity here. There's a lot going on. One, it's steady. The floor is just stable. If you look at the population of Portage Park in 1930, 1980, today, like if you take any of those and just take any random year, it's within like 5 grand of each other. Like it's just been at 55,000 people for the last 100 years. And you can look at that 2 ways. One, be like, oh, this thing's not going gangbusters, or you can look at it and say, okay, this is steady. This thing has seen a depression. This thing has seen a couple world wars. This thing has seen pandemic, and it's here. It's always here. The tenant mix, the residents, it's a very good mix. You have a mix of blue and white collar folks. You have a lot of city workers. There's just a lot to like about it. And for our house hackers out there, there's streets that are just 2 to 4 units. Like the whole housing inventory, some of these streets you go on, especially call it like Irving to Montrose, in that pocket from, I don't know, Central, take it to maybe Cicero. I mean, it's nothing but bungalows and 2 to 4 units. And like, that's it. And so if you're looking for the, small multi, if you're looking for that house hack, like there's a lot of opportunity there.
You use the word bias, but a lot of times we hear on the show, go where or go something you're comfortable with, the familiarity. Can bias be replaced with the word familiarity in there? Like, is that kind of what gives you your superpower there?
Yes, familiarity is a good word to use, and just understanding, price differentials, from being on, call it that, that southeast side, like Belmont Cicero, is completely different than being by the actual park on Earth. Like, they're both Portage Park, but they are two different neighborhoods. They're going to be at two different price points. So yes, familiarity is huge, but then also not getting overzealous, right? And wanting to buy everything because, it's, this has served me well. This one served me well. You still can't stretch. You still need to stay within your discipline.
Gotcha. So stay disciplined on limiting your threat. So I imagine there's got to be a lot of corners you could stand. I give you a couple addresses and you could stand there and tell me what's on all four corners. Like that's the level of familiar you have, I imagine there, right?
Yeah, for sure. Especially like I said, like that Montrose to Addison, like I can give you every side street going, on that 8-block radius, right? You can probably pull out a couple like, I can kind of picture this. If you told me the 5100 block of whatever, like it's very familiar territory for me, even before investing. Just growing up there, half the battle, right? Just knowing those streets.
Well, one of the things I think is awesome about Harwood Heights is you almost you have all these 50s and 60s built kind of raised ranches. And some of the neighborhoods don't even have many trees, so it almost feels like you're in Arizona sometimes when you're driving down maybe Lawrence over there. But how is the housing stock in Portage Park as far as age? Are they all 120-year-old stuff, or do you have newer post-war type stuff there as well too?
You got a lot of 100-year-old brick. Like that's going to be predominantly most of it. You do have some of these east-west running streets too. They are like frame bungalows, so there is some frame involved. And it kind of goes by street. Like one street will just be all brick, the next street will be all frame, the next street will be a hodgepodge of most. Predominantly brick. You do have some of that post-war, like 1960s, 1970s. We picked up a 6-unit on Montrose, and that is, 1960 something. And that whole corridor on Montrose, if you take it from like Central all the way to like Wright College on Nagel, which is like the edge of the city there, like that corridor is all 60s, 70s. And they're all 6 unit, 8 units, 10 units. Some of them are condos now, but that's, those yellow brick buildings that are 50 years old instead of 120.
What do you like and not like about those? Those are big everywhere around city and suburbs. What do you like? What do you look out most for when you're looking at one of those newer built yellow brick buildings, I guess?
Yeah, not the problem, but a lot of times with those newer buildings, they're new enough where he meaning the seller or the owner, hasn't touched the boiler. Like he's touched the boiler, but he hasn't replaced it, right? You got the old pulley windows. If they're 100 years old, like they've probably been replaced at some point. When it's 50 years old, like he might still be riding on his last leg there, right? No, but the brick, like the actual brick, like I don't have any preference of like, I want a 100-year-old home versus a 60-year-old. A lot of times though, like those homes that are newer, you can see the old off the boat owner who just had it for 50 years and did the bare minimum to keep it alive. And now you just have to account for that in your underwriting of, okay, like there's a lot of CapEx expenses here that aren't going to raise rent that I need to account for in my numbers.
Yeah, I think you see a lot of those did not suffer during the Great Recession there, 2010 area, because these were the original owners that have owned it forever, or the kids are handling it now, and there's plenty of equity. And so you didn't even see a lot of those really go through the short sale or foreclosure process when the market crashed. So it was something that I was amazed by. To your point, though, a lot of those major CapEx things have never been touched. I think we always run into the galvanized versus copper. And I think all those bathrooms were built the same with those same tiles. So you almost end up getting a lot of these older bathrooms. So it's like, man, you really got to rip out the tile and you got to do the piping and all that stuff. I always tell people look out for that on those.
Yeah, sometimes you still see the cloth wiring as well, right? And it's just like, all right. Damn.
Yeah. Well, the one other thing you compare a 6-flat in the 60s to the 120 is the parking lot. Now all of a sudden you have a parking lot that you have to plow or you have to shovel. A lot of those 6-flats have that, or they might have a shared motor repair association, but you typically don't have that in a 6-flat. Maybe you got to do a sidewalk, or you got to do a walk up, or maybe a small parking area. But that's something that a lot of times people don't account for. Looking around Portage Park, like from like when you were a kid growing up to now, like what are the big changes? I know you said slow and steady, but what's impressed you about like the neighborhood over the years?
I'm actually surprised how much from the Great Recession to now, how much pricing took off in a good way. It took off more than Jeff Park, and which is, I would have lost that bet. I would have assumed that Jeff would have outperformed it because Jeff Park had more transportation. Like you're right off the highway there. You have the Blue Line stop that also has a Metro stop. Like I would have bet on Jeff over Portage, and I would have been wrong. Like it's been great to see all this development coming into Portage. It's been great to see Six Corners start to get revitalized, which we can get into over at Irving, Milwaukee, and Cicero. But besides that, man, it's the same song and dance. It's very similar population. It's it's very similar when I grew up.
Six Corners, go to that. I remember growing up myself, like it wasn't that nice. I mean, there's been a lot of money put into that.
Yeah, so my dad grew up right behind there. So we were there a lot, right? And to be clear, this is the Six Corners, like I said, Irving, Cicero, Milwaukee, not this Wicker Park stuff that everyone's called. This is the real Six Corners we're talking about here. So they're building it up, and there used to be the Sears building on the north side of the street of Irving there. There for whatever hundreds of years it feels like, right? But for real though, it was probably there 50 years. That's like $100 million development now. That's going to be, I think, like 200 or 250 apartments, and the type of apartments that are going to fetch, $3,000 a month type in rent. And then the ground floor, they're going to have a Target. So you have a Target, you're going to have these high-end apartments getting about $3,000 a month in rent. The hope is that will bring enough bodies, enough people with expandable income to then keep some of this Milwaukee corridor and Irving corridor stores open. Because right now it's a little hit and miss. There's a restaurant here, there's a few nice little stores here, but you still got a lot of retail, for lease, for sale. You still got just a bunch of random little shops that no one really cares about. You don't have much parking over there. So the hope is between that Sears building, which is now going to be, like I said, 200 apartments, and across the street they did, it's called the Clarendale, and that is senior living. Now, I don't remember how many units it is, but it's, I looked it up. If you live there independent, it's like $4,000 or $5,000 a month, and with assistance, it's like $7,000 or $8,000 a month. So it's like a high-end senior living. And then the Aldi's is coming in that corner as well. So there's a lot going on there that's, it's for the last 10 years, it's kind of like, what's going to happen here? And the last, like, call it 18 months to 2 years, like it's actually happening. So if that all happens, and if this all goes as planned, you start to get more restaurants, you start to get more bars, you start to get a lot more lively atmosphere, and becomes a place that people want to go. The other thing it's got going for it too, to the east there is Old Irving Park. And that neighborhood now, people are taking those 50-foot lots. We've talked about this on other episodes, and those are $2 million homes now. Like people are looking at either going to Winnetka or to Old Irving Park. Like it's starting to compete with North Shore suburbs. So you have like this built up wealth coming from the east too, which should help as well.
How is the wards set up for the aldermen? I mean, a lot of development or steadiness is driven by just control of the alderman's office. How many wards is this broken up into when you're in Portage Park?
I think it's two. I think it's Gardner and Sposato, two aldermen. There might be a third going south. But I know like Gardner's ward, which is where I'm in Jeff Park, but he takes Milwaukee all the way down, like past Irving. It's kind of like a skinny little ward that just runs all up and down Milwaukee from like Gladstone Park to, I don't know, maybe like Schurz. It runs pretty far south there.
It's so messed up, the map.
Yeah, it's goofy. And then they just realigned it too. So he took over more Portage. He used to be cut off at Laramie. I knew this because I had a development I was looking at. And it was going to be Sposato. And then when it changed, it went to Gardner. We ended up not getting the deal. So it was a moot point. But yeah, so John Arena was the original alderman that got this all started. Like he was pushing development. And Gardner is now the alderman there. And he's kind of been running forward with it. And there's a lot of people excited about it. There is a lot of pushback though, right? People have opinions that, no, this has been a small community that I've lived in the last 50 years. I don't want these people here, or whether that's right or wrong. So it's not just like everyone's doing cartwheels that this development's happening. There has been a lot of, what about traffic? What about this? And some of these concerns I say are extremely valid. And And some of them are kind of like, hey, come on, what are you doing?
Bringing that up traffic wise, like what is traffic like going through there? How bad is it to get through Six Corners? Like, tell me how easy or difficult that is.
No, it's not bad. It's bad now because Milwaukee's shut down going south of there. They shut it down because they're redoing the Grayland station, the metro station. So Milwaukee's kind of a mess. Everyone knows 90's a mess right now. So people are using Milwaukee. They're using Elston to go through. So it's heavier traffic than usual. But, I think it's not congested, right? You start looking at other neighborhoods in the city. It's all relative, right? If you're comparing it to a suburb, you can say, yes, this is congested. If you compare it to a more dense area in the city, it feels like a suburb. So it's all relative in what you're comparing it to.
Portage Park has probably the actual park. All the different areas have a park or a park center. Portage Park seems to be just more loved by the community than most other communities. Why is that? Or why is there such a gravitation? To me, it seems like it gets used more than most parks too. Like, am I off on that assumption?
No, it's one, it's huge. Like I think if you run around it, like if you run the perimeter of it, it's a mile, like a mile around. It's got it's like most parks got a gym, but that's got a separate little area for boxing. It's got a pool. The pool actually held the 72 Olympic trials. That's like what it's famous for. And anyone you talk to will bring it up. I landscaped there for, 5-6 years as the high school, college type job. And it's beautiful. Like I've stood up in 2 separate weddings where we did our photos at Portage. So like, you go after the church, you go to take your photos. Like they did it at Portage Park. And that's pretty common. Like it's beautiful. It's big. You have a decent amount of population around there too. So it gets a lot of love.
Yeah, I think that's one of the best parks to live on, I think, in the city as well too.
And just for like I know you guys manage a couple things on Bertaux there on the north side of I was looking with one of my buyers over there, but I had an appraisal done on one of my properties, and he used the comp that was on Bertaux. So Bertaux is a street that faces the park. Like just you walk outside, the park's right there, and he gave him a $15,000 credit. Like I was trying to quantify, like, man, what is this worth? And I actually went back and looked at my old appraisal. The comp he used, he gave him a $15,000 credit over my building that was just on a normal block for being on the park there. That seems high, but like it also is kind of like I can buy this. I can buy the concept that someone would pay an extra 15 G's to be right here on the park.
That makes sense though to me, because I compare that to if you go buy a new construction home out here in the suburbs right now. If you back to nothing, you back to retention, like a shitty retention pond, like they'll jam you $15,000, $20,000, $25,000. Not saying walkout basement, not saying English basement, just like you back to nothing, which might not even be guaranteed not to be developed. They'll charge you another 15, 20 grand. So I can see where that makes sense.
Yeah.
Bertaux right there. I just bring that up specifically. I know there's a great school there. Talk to me about like the schools. It seems like Portage has some awesome schools, even within the system as well too.
Yeah, it's all relative, right? If you're going to compare it to like a Coonley or any of those, like it's not going to stand up. But compared to other parts of the city, yes, they're pretty solid. So right there on Bertaux, that's Portage Park Elementary. That's where my dad went to school.
Okay.
So that's good. You have is it Pershing or Pershing? If you go on the other side of Central, going westbound, you do get a lot. It's a very, there's a lot of Polish, a lot of Hispanic, a lot of Irish. So you do have like a Catholic school every 4 blocks. Yeah, and they're being consolidated, but there's a lot of, you just going through the neighborhood, you'll find like, oh, this random block and here's another Catholic school, because in the 60s and 70s, that's all there was. So you have a mix of the public and the private. They're, I would say, good schools, but again, they're not, we're not talking Coonley type good. It's all relative to what you're comparing.
Portage with the schools and the churches kind of reminds me of like Evergreen Park and like Beverly down there on the southwest side. I think they have a lot. Heck, down there, you don't even say what neighborhood you move in. They say whatever.
Yeah, what parish you're from.
What parish you're from. Like that's, I don't know if you guys did that up there, but I know that's how they do it down south.
Yeah, and then like when I went to U of I, like I met guys from Immerse, and like those guys from the south side it's just a mirror image. Like it's a very, very similar vibe and feel. So
in Portage Park, what have you been working on the last 5-6 years? Are you only doing buy and hold there? Are you doing flips? Like tell me a little bit about your investing experience that you've been doing.
It's been both. It's been predominantly buy and holds as of late. So Chris and I, we started on the south side. Like that's where, we kind of cut our teeth, and we eventually migrated up to, hey, like let's do bigger deals. And we did a lot of, call it, that easy bungalow flip, right? Back then you can do it for, $80,000 or whatever. Like pretty much cosmetic, not adding on a dormer or anything, just taking the existing and making it awesome. We did a good amount of those, and I would love to do more of those. The problem is there's not a lot of inventory. End buyers now are getting so desperate they're buying those type of properties. So that's jacking up the price. You almost need something completely distressed. And then when you get into these situations where you need to add a dormer or you need to pop the top of like a bungalow, it's just hard to get those numbers to work. You got to buy at such a discount. If you're going to spend $250,000 on a rehab and ARVs are only going in like, call it the sixes, well, what purchase price do you need to be at then to make a profit, right? It's a pretty low number.
Pop the top. Give a little explanation for that for those people that have not heard us talk about that before in the past.
Yeah, so there's good ways to do it, and there's bad ways to do it. But pop the top. So picture like a normal Chicago bungalow, right? More times than not, you're gonna have just the attic's just gonna be an unfinished kind of framed area that in the middle you can walk down, but you can't. It's not like a usable or livable space. So your options are, depending on the slope of the roof and the pitch, is you can dormer. You can dormer like a whole side. We've done that. We've had success with that. We actually did one on 4800 block of Hutchinson. It was the first one we did. You can just dormer spots, right? They have little cutouts. So it's like, all right, there's like a playroom and we did a little dormer for the bathroom. Or you can just completely take the top off, right? So just get rid of it completely and make it a true second story. Now, a lot of times when people do that though, it looks pretty ugly and out of sync with the neighborhood. So you need to be careful when doing that to make sure that you're architecturally going to fit in with the rest of the neighborhood.
If you did a full one, like what's the range? I mean, dormer, we've done that before. You probably get away with that. Depending how structural it really gets for what you're trying to do underneath. It's only $20,000 or so. We've done that before. Like, what was like a full one cost, like range?
Just to pop the top?
Yeah.
I mean, it's you're talking hundreds of thousands of dollars. Like it's not a small number.
Because I guess you just walk through this. You literally take off the roof and then you take off everything down to like the bottom floor and you kind of build walls up and you put a new roof on, right? Like
right. It's like, getting pretty close to new construction.
You're building a brand new house on top of it
around there.
Okay.
So it's cool because you get to keep the original brick, right? You still have that. It looks awesome. Keep in mind, even when you're doing just like the dormer, like let's take a step back. Like let's say you're just doing like a little dormer and doing a bathroom there. Where this gets really hard to make the numbers work is you're going to get caught for water service. And for those who are like, I've had conversations with people in the suburbs, like, yeah, water service costs us, $12,000, $10,000. In the city, it's going to cost you 20 to 25. You can't just jet it in one spot. You got to do the whole thing. You got to get the CDOT permit. You got to get the permit for tapping. Like they're just doing it within city limits is going to be more expensive than if you're not used to it.
You got to repair the street. You got to whatever.
Yeah. Like you're on the hook for everything. And it's pain. So you're on, it's $25,000 out the door, plus just the headache of all doing everything. Then you actually have to have plans, right? Paying for plans and permits. You're paying for there's like $40,000 just gone before you do any actual work, right? So it gets really hard to make those things work. But where we call it, even like when the pandemic first started or pre-pandemic, like we were able to buy bungalows that call it, you can buy for $200 and just put $100 into it and then sell at $450. Like those were good deals. And then we started doing the dormers where you buy it, buy something at around $200, $180 to $220 range, put another $200 into it and sell like in the sixes. Like those were good deals. Like that math would work all day long. The problem is nothing sells at $200 anymore. They're bumping up against $300. Rehab costs are also higher. ARVs are getting better, but they're not going gangbusters.
How recent did the really price explosion happen? Has it been just more of a supply issue the last couple of years, or this happened 5-6 years ago?
I think more and more people are looking to get into an area. This is purely anecdotal, but I feel there's more end buyers buying this type of property we used to buy. It's like $100K rehab for us. Like you can also do that for $40K and not do it as nice. So like the fireman can buy that home and over time be like, all right, honey, we're gonna do the kitchen this year. We're gonna do the bath this year. Because you get a lot of these longtime owners, like they lived there forever. Like they came home from World War II, bought this bungalow, and now they died, right? And the kids don't want it, but they kept it up. And you might have the shaggy carpet, you might have the wallpaper, you might have all that. But at the end of the day, like they took care of the place. So you can go in there and live day one. And
so
those properties, and those properties should almost go to an end buyer, right? They get, if they have the ability to, slowly but surely make it their own, great, God bless. So like there's not that many of those, and when they do hit the market, it's hard for developers to compete because we need to be making a profit on these things.
Yeah, there's a lot more people doing that these days just due to the lack of inventory, or they're settling for that. When I think even 20, 30 years ago, that was something that just couples did. They bought a house, they could barely afford to get in the house, they'll fix it up, and they just kind of live with it, and they fix it up over the years, and they get their dream kitchen till their kids went to college. So it's funny how that kind of resurfaces. Keep going down that line though. You've been buying and holding, like you obviously ran out of opportunity. What's like the price point there, like the highest price points you have in town per unit, I guess, or in the neighborhood?
Yeah, if you're talking like 2 to 4 units.
Yeah, I guess talk single family and then talk just on a 2 to 4 per unit type price point.
Yes. So I'll start with 2 to 4 units because single family is a little funky because you can get stuff to appraise out at. There's pockets where you have like these historic bungalows that are going to go for $700-800K. Like there's big boys that are good. 2 to 4 units, depending on a lot of factors, but like I think the average sale price in that is going to fall. Wagner had his report, and I think it's like 520 or like 550, like somewhere between 5 and 550 is probably the average price. If you have a nice, my buddy is actually selling one right next to mine. He's got a legal 3 unit that he's rehabbed. It's going to go in the mid 6s, right? And that I would think a nice rehab unit, like a nice rehab property, like that's probably what you're going to pay for a legal 3 unit. I'd say the 2 units, like you don't really see anything lower than 400. Like that's when you start getting developer territory where I'm looking at and saying, all right, what can I do here? So I think that's kind of like a broad range where I guess let's talk a couple of factors there, right? What's going to dictate price? Like, is it a 2? Is it a 3? Is it a legal 3? Just the overall condition of it, where it's at in Portage Park as well. Like going back to the original conversation of boundaries, like being around the park there, it's a much different vibe than, call it the further south you go. Like you're over at Belmont Cicero, you're going to be at a lower price, or you should be at a lower price point than, you're on one of those streets like Berteau, Cullum, Hutchinson, right around the park. I think the couple other things too is more times than not, you're going to have boilers in these. Some owners have done the central HVAC, and I'm starting to see, tenants for the most part, going to start, I think over the next, call it 5 years, like it's, central HVAC is going to be not a must have, but if you're going to do, remodels, it's going to be almost expected. So just a couple factors there.
You brought up, legal units there a couple times. Cities on the push for ADU, they might expand the pilot program to everywhere. Like, is there opportunity for ADU units in town there? Is there a lot of non-conforming units that people could take advantage of maybe in the upcoming years?
Yeah. So do they exist? Yes. Will the ADU program allow them to be legalized? No. Like it's not. Yeah, here's my little rant. We can link to a blog that I wrote on this on our site. The ADU program does a very good job of making it easy for owners and investors to get around the legal shenanigans of making it a legal unit. You don't need to get the community involved. You don't need the alderman to sign off. Like they have streamlined that process, and they've done a very good job. What they haven't done though is put any ease on what the Department of Buildings, so not zoning, but Department of Buildings is going to require you to do to legalize that unit. So more times than not, let's say you have a 2 unit where you have someone living in the basement. It's not conforming. You want to be above board. You want to make it a legal 3. To do that, you're going to pay to upgrade the water service, which we already talked about. So you're 20, 25 D's out right there. You're also, if you're under 7 feet, if it's 6'11", you're gutting the whole unit. You need to dig down. You need to get to 7. Like And at that point, doesn't matter, like you can't keep anything. You have to gut it. Even if you don't, let's say you have the 7 feet, you still have to have the 2 egresses. You say, okay, I might have that. You still need light and vent for each bedroom. A lot of times in these areas, we don't think about that. So like now you're popping in windows, you're cutting into brick to do that. You're going to get the 3rd electric box, or I should say the 4th, like you need one for the common area as well. So you're going to pay for all that. You're going to pay to upgrade the meters. There's just, it's going to be a 6-figure job more times than not. Maybe you can get away with less if it's already kind of set up legally, it's set up in a better condition. But a lot of times, like it's a big expense where you as an investor just can't justify doing it, right? You just say, well, screw it. I'm just going to leave it as non-conforming because the amount of money the city wants me to pump into this thing so they can give me a piece of paper that says it's a legal 3 just doesn't compute.
What does, I know we've talked about this on the show before, digging down, I'm like, is that a cost like per inch you go down, or is that cost per square foot? Like, tell me about your experience on that and like what that could cost.
Yeah, I mean, it's how far do you got to go? And then if you need to get past the footing, so let's say you had like a 6'6" basement, you can only dig the footing's only another 4 inches or whatever. If you have to do more than that in underpin, like that's when your costs are going to start, really start creeping up on you, which you really won't know until you get to the footing.
And for underpinning, that's basically saying, all right, you're building a foundation underneath the existing foundation because you're
pretty much.
Okay.
So there's a lot that goes into it, and it's just it's an oversight. Where the ADU program does very well, and where we've utilized it, is when you're already going to gut the basement, right? If you already have nothing down there, or it's just unfinished and just crappy concrete slab, and you're gonna do this anyways, it makes complete sense. When you already have someone living there, and it's an okay to good unit, like it doesn't make sense to tear it apart.
That makes sense. Yeah, you got to do that evaluation. What about on the rear of lots, whether it be over garages or anything like that? Is that common in Portage at all?
No, because even grandfathered in, there's not. I can't picture one coach house.
Yeah, I can't either. I mean, I don't know that well, but yeah.
But doing the coach house, we're going through this exercise right now. We're building a coach house in Lakeview, and you can get away with it in Lakeview because the cost to build a coach house is going to be whatever, $200 to $250K, give or take, all the things you got to do. You got to run the water out there. It's a pain in the ass. That price per unit makes sense when you're in Lincoln Park, Lakeview, these A+ neighborhoods. It does not make sense in a Portage Park, Jeff Park type neighborhood yet, right? Because that cost of construction is going to be roughly the same in both areas, maybe nicer finishes, but for the most part, you're 90% the same on the rehab cost. And the ARV, or the amount of money you'll get back for putting in that effort, is not going to compute in these, more, working class, B class type neighborhoods.
Yeah. What rent wise these days? Like, how are rents doing? Is it tough to rent things up there? I mean, I imagine it's pretty easy if you got a good product. Tell me a little bit about the rental side of things, because you guys are turning units pretty quick.
Yeah. So I'm very bullish. This is where I'm very bullish on Portage. Because I've seen it firsthand. Like our rents have just gone bananas. And I know that's across most of the city, right? But where we're seeing is there's a lot of good vintage product, right? I'll take the, Drexel Properties has, call it, I think like 6 or 7 buildings in Portage Park. And these are all buildings that are 10 units or more, like big, nice vintage buildings, clean. And I feel like that product is good. It's stable. You turn those over, you're going to get a tenant right away. Those are easy. And then taking it a step further, when you start getting into, call it like doing nicer rehabs, whereas before I was a little nervous to like put a lot of money into a unit and, do in-unit washer dryer, like in Portage. Now, like, I know there's going to be a product. There's going to be people lining up for that. Like tenant expectations are starting to get higher. People are getting pushed out, going east to west. And so like you can start to do nicer things and start to recoup that cost at a much faster clip. So to give you an idea, like numbers, I guess I'm rambling here, but a couple of things to consider too when I say these things. Another big thing is because we have so many 2 to 4 unit buildings, keep in mind, like the nice thing about 2 to 4 unit buildings, you get that actual formal dining room. Like they're big units. And you go down some of these blocks too, like there's blocks like that are just pure 2 to 4 units, but most of them are, 30-foot lot, 35-foot lot. Like it's not like Rogers Park where it's like a concrete jungle. There's parking in front, like you got bungalows thrown in there, so you have residents who have their garages. Like it's just a nice feel, and then you're going to get more for rent on those because you have a formal dining room. you just have like a 1,500, 1,600 square foot apartment compared to, you might have a 2-1, but it might be 4 rooms, right? That's totally different than a 2-1 that's inside a 3 unit, because you have the formal dining, you have more of that homeowner feel to it, as opposed to, it's a 3-story walk up.
It's a big deal. It's a big difference in floor plan when you have that.
People mess up their rent comps all the time on this, right? And then they'll also just do a search of Portage or 60641. It's like, as we said earlier, man, it's very, if you're on Montrose versus Addison, like that's 2 different neighborhoods. Like it's different. But just like broad strokes, like 3-1s now, and we talked about this when Wagner was on the show with us, but like you should be getting 2 Gs on a nice 3-1, meaning like you did the rehab, you kitchened, bath, you should be getting north of 2 Gs now, which 2 years ago, like we weren't getting. Now we are. We're getting easy. So I'd say like a 3-1, depending on area and all that fun stuff, you're gonna be like, $1,800 to $2,000 to $2,200 even. You have nice 2-2s in some of these buildings, like condo-like buildings. You have 2-2s going for over $2,000 now. The 2-1s will have like the biggest variance for all the reasons we just talked about. Location, is it a 4-room? Is it a 5-room? Is it HVAC? Is heat included, or are they getting central air condition? But I don't think anything goes under, call it 1,300. Like that's probably the low end for like a, just a vintage product. And then like we just had one that went for 1,800. It was a 2-1. So like I think that's like a safe range. Like you're gonna fall somewhere in there depending on what you're offering. And then 1-1s just goes so quickly. Nothing goes under $1,000 anymore. So I'd say like $1,000 to $1,400, $1,500 for a 1-1, just depending on where you are and what you did to it.
Well, it's crazy. A lot of people don't appreciate that, but in the neighborhoods, not talking about the walk-ups on the boulevards, stuff like that, but in neighborhoods, when you have these 1-1s, they go a lot faster than just because they're rare to find within the depth of the neighborhood. So yeah, spot on there.
Yeah, and the whole city has seen rents increase, right? We've had it good. You can be an idiot right now and bought something 3 years ago, locked in at 3 or 4%, and seen your rents go up and think you're a genius, right?
Yeah.
Which is great. Like let's all take advantage of it. What I think now is you're going to have to start providing a better product than what you used to do 5 or 10 years ago. Do the in a good way. And there's going to be there's always going to be demand for that vintage product. Affordable housing is there's dire need for that in the city. So if you have vintage product, great. Like it's always going to be a safe bet. But I think like there's money to be made in these nicer rehabs that we like to do. Like I truly feel that. And then the other thing I've noticed too, in these 2 to 3 units that we have, like we're getting tenants who, they just can't buy a house right now. Right. So that if they get 1,600 square feet and 3 bedrooms or whatever it is, it's like, all right, well, this is going to be my home until I can buy a house. Right. Stay 2 years, 3 years, 4 years, etc.
Do you feel that because there's such a lack of supply right now, that if there ever becomes supply, that rent will actually go down? Maybe that's
I don't. It's hard. It's so hard to build. There's not opportunity to just build. Like I don't understand how supply is going to become that much greater than it is today. And I could be wrong here, but we looked at an adaptive reuse project in Portage, an old school, and one of the things that really attracted me is like this is like the only chance I have to. You can't just go build a floor. There's nowhere physically to do that. So, we talked about earlier, you have this set population, like the population in Portage Park is between 50 and 60,000, and it has been for the last 100 something years, right? So you have this steady group of folks, like, if you want to call that demand. And the supply side is like 6 corners. Yes, that's being built up, but in my opinion, that's just going to attract more people. There's not like, it's not like the south side, there's all these empty lots where it's like, man, this could really,
take off.
People keep getting pushed this way, right? And the last person I had moved in came from Logan, right? They got priced out, and now they're in Portage.
No, I think I have the same stance. I don't think it's going to change anytime soon. I think that supply is going to be an issue for a long time. I think you have a new generation of investors that we didn't have the last couple generations, and I think they're going to continue to be more aggressive, even more aggressive than the homeowners or the agents that those homeowners are working with. And I think you're going to continue exactly what you're saying.
We have a housing shortage. Like we have a legit issue in Chicago, right?
Yeah.
And so like I don't see I don't know. It's something that needs to be fixed, but I don't ever see like this glut of supply coming to like neighborhoods like this. I also don't see the neighborhood just tripling in value, right? It's both ways. It's slow and steady. It's easy.
All right, dude. I love it, man. I love it. Anything else you want to say about Portage before we do the wrap? You got to do the wrap-up questions. You ready for this? We didn't even prepare.
No, I think we talked. I don't know. I'm trying to think of anything we didn't cover on. But yeah, if you want to do like a 4-hour deep dive and go street by street, we can do that. But I think it'd be boring for 98% of the people listening here.
Now, you give a lot of good advice and a lot of good background on who Tom Shallcross is and where he came from. I love it, man. So, all right, you ready? It's weird. I'm going to have to ask the questions you normally ask here.
Yeah, I'm more ready for this than what I was like when I was 7. Wasn't caught off guard there.
Yeah. So everyone listening, all those questions about the personal side of the beginning was totally off track there. I actually heard Ryan Holiday get interviewed by Jocko, and I'm like, he totally did a deep dive on Ryan Holiday. So I'm like, I'm going to do it with Tom. All right, cool. Question 1, what is your competitive advantage? How have you been able to be so successful in Portage Park?
I think it's 2 things. So 1, I'm good at being uncomfortable, right? So stepping outside that comfort zone, which is really the only way you're going to grow. And I've just gotten, whether it be repetition or just having success in the past, like I'm fine playing in that zone. I think the other thing is just, that discipline or hustle or grind or whatever you want to call it. But I've always been that guy. Like I was always that dude winning the coaches award and all that stuff. And that serves well when you have adversity, you can just keep grinding through it.
All right, love it. What's one piece of advice you will tell someone that has yet to buy the first property here in Chicago?
I'd say commit. There's so many people who are interested in real estate, but like if you truly commit, you'll do it. I can't remember who did the quote, John Asperoff. If you're interested, you'll do what's convenient. If you're committed, you'll do whatever it takes. And I feel 90% of people are interested. They like going on Redfin. They like the idea of owning real estate. They like the idea of this passive income and being on a beach or whatever it is. But unless you truly commit and you're going to deal with, the crap that no one else wants to deal with, like it's that's the only way this ever becomes a reality.
I love it. All right, what do you do for fun? Play the guitar, play the drums, play some softball. I'll answer it for you. No, I'm joking.
Yeah, you just answered it for me, man. No, I got 4 kids. That keeps us busy. So that's probably the main answer. Summer, I do play softball. I have a lot of fun Monday and Friday nights over at Merrimack Park, and I don't know, just hanging out with friends.
That's why I saw some people playing softball in St. Charles the other day. I thought of you. I'm like, man, I wish I played softball. It's tough. When you get older and you haven't played in a while, you think, I bet you I'd go out there and do good. But then I start thinking, I'm like, more like I'm just gonna go out there and be horrible probably. But still want to try. Anyway, got any softball teams? I'm willing to join. And I'll bring Shay with me too, former baseball player. Sorry, Shay.
I was gonna say package deal, man. You're good.
Jay Murray he played for Pittsburgh Pirates. I'll bring him along. So it'll be like Darryl Strawberry in the Simpsons episode for anyone that's 35.
That went over so many of our listeners.
I know. All right, good book, podcast, or self-development you're currently using and recommend.
You got me on The Road Less Stupid. I love that book. Like I never heard of it. You were the one who got me on that, and I just love the questions at the end of it, of each chapter, because you can just at any given day I can just go to one of those chapters, have those questions, and start answering them. And I do almost like a quarterly type of like check-in with myself. Like those are real good ones if you want to keep progressing. I'm a huge fan of that. Listen, I don't mention, but that's a good one when you're feeling stressed out and just need to kind of level set. Atomic Habits, I can go on. Extreme Ownership, like we've probably had 5 or 6 of these already mentioned. Podcast, man, I'll go. I'm usually pretty humble, but I'm gonna go us here. Like this is one of the things I'm probably most proud of. Like we put out good content, and I'm proud of that. It's obviously I'm preaching to the choir, but this is something that I take good pride in.
I rarely listen to the, once it goes live on iTunes or whatever, and I clicked on it the other day, and I was listening to it, and I enjoyed it. Flintstone does a great job at doing all the underwriting and so forth, and all the editing, and right away then my son walked in. He's like, "Is that all you do all day? Is just sitting there and listen to yourself?" He started busting my chops about it. I'm like, I swear it's the first time. All right, awesome. Besides yourself, name one person in your local network you'd highly recommend to other investors.
Now I got a laundry list here. I don't want to leave anyone out, so I don't know if I should say no one or everyone. But most of the people on your Build Your Team page that we have, like, that's a lot of my team. I've mentioned Chris several times, my GC. Chance is my lawyer. I got a handful of lenders. Renovo and Workman have been with me from the get-go, though, so obviously I have huge loyalty to those guys. But yeah, if you are in need of any sort of connection, like, feel free to hit me up. I'm always happy to share.
I was looking through my calendar there yesterday, and I was going way back, and I ended up in 2016. And I saw a meeting with Kevin Warner and Eric Workman in March of 2016, and I texted over to him. It's been a while. So I love working with those guys. All right, cool. Thank you so much. You've provided a ton of value to our listeners. How can they learn more about you? And is there any way they can provide value to you? It's so weird asking the questions you don't really ask. Like, I have to, I don't know.
You got to read them?
Yeah, I got to read them. Yeah.
So we have the Ask Mark and Tom on the website. You can find us there. You're looking to house hack on the north side, I can help. You're looking for just, assistance with anything. I usually have the right person in my network, so feel free to reach out. I'm on Instagram. T Shallcross 723. You follow the Straight Up Chicago, and that's usually me, Mark, or someone from the team. So you'll be able to hunt me down.
Awesome. All right. So I'll today we're gonna do it different today. I'm gonna ask Chicago fact. So hopefully you're ready, and it's gonna be about Portage Park. So hopefully you're ready, and I'm not giving you multiple choice. So hopefully you're ready.
Oh man.
No pressure. So today's episode we're going to play. It's gonna be Anna Licata. Who bought a t-shirt actually out of Florida here recently. So Anna, if Tom gets this question right here, you'll get a $50 gift card brought to you by, who is our sponsor today? Usually you give me that.
That's usually my job.
Brought to you by, we'll announce that later. All right. Portage Park was named after more of a thing than a person. What was that named after?
I actually do know this answer. So a portage is like almost a walkway that links two like bodies of water, right? So it was the area that linked the Chicago River and another river, and I don't know the other river. So Fox Displays, one of the local ones here.
All right, I got to give you that one. If it's Family Feud, they give you this one all day. But yeah, it was the Native Americans and fur traders used to portage their canoes between Des Plaines and Chicago rivers, and that's actually how you got Portage Park. So,
boom,
nice. Anna, you get a $50 gift card brought to you by.
Hey man, I'm just a guest today. I'm off.
All right, NEGC, whether we owe it to you or not, you got one. So NEGC, thank you for sponsoring today's Chicago Fact. All right, man. Dude, today's episode was fun, man. Eventually, maybe we'll have to turn the tails and you'll interview me, but I don't know anything expert-wise like you do, so we'll have to find my superpower. Thanks for coming on here, man. Listeners, check out Build Your Team. So Build Your Team's been up there for just about 4 weeks, and we've had more clicks on that one page than we've had on all the rest of our pages for the rest of this year. So a lot of people are checking it out. I think I've heard a lot of people getting our actual vendors on there have been getting calls. So there's a lot of great people on there. We've been preaching forever that don't spend all the time trying to trial out people. Use somebody that's reputable. Use somebody that someone else used, and that's what we wanted to build out here for you guys. So check out straightupchicagoinvestor.com. Go to Build Your Team right there on the homepage. So Tom, thank you as always. Tom, thank you as always. And listeners, we'll see you next week.
Thanks all.